Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As we meet today, Africa has made a turnaround in terms of growth. As the Executive Secretary mentioned in her opening statement, Africa grew at 3.1% in 2017, up from about 1.6% the year before, and the prospect is positive. Africa also continued to make progress in terms of social development, in terms of addressing issues of poverty, inequality, education, health, and so on. And overall, fiscal and current account deficits in Africa remain stable, and actually we have seen a slight decline in 2017 in fiscal deficit. And we have seen changes in monetary policy to respond to challenges of pressure on currencies and changes in trade. Africa's trade performance rebounded during 2017, which is a good sign, another good sign, and the outlook for Africa as a whole is positive. So this figure 1 shows a growth rebound in 2017 in Africa, and Africa is once again the second highest growing region in the world, second to East and South Asia. The continent as a whole, and we have observed this over so many years, which is a good sign, and we would like to encourage all countries to maintain this good macroeconomic governance, good macroeconomic management that helped the continent to really maintain a sort of stability that was conducive to investment and growth in most countries. Although we have risk in some countries, and we also have seen slow diversification in different sectors, although the diversification we have seen so far remains limited compared to Africa's potential and Africa's need to create jobs and to accelerate and sustain growth over the medium and long term. Looking at growth by sub-region, East Africa continues to be the best performing sub-region, maintaining growth of about 5.3% in 2017, and East Africa was the region that invested a lot in infrastructure. We have seen most countries in the region maintaining the trend of high investment in infrastructure and in social services. But East Africa seems to be doing more relative to GDP. We have also seen the agricultural sector rebounding in many countries in 2017, contributing to growth. And most countries in the region actually stabilized in 2017 compared to 2016 and 2015 as well. So we have seen a narrowing of fiscal deficit for Africa as a whole to 5% of GDP in 5.3% in 2017, compared to a high of about 9.6% the year before, and a much higher deficit in 2015. This was due to fiscal consolidation in a number of countries, and this is also a demonstration of continued commitment to sound macroeconomic management in most countries. However, we have seen some pressure on debt, public debt. We have seen especially increases in external debt. And also the quality of debt has changed a lot in terms of interest rates. So many countries committed to foreign loans at high interest rates. And this can be a challenge in the medium and long term in terms of repayment requirements. Overall, also we have seen improvement in terms of inflation rates. For the continent as a whole, the rate of inflation declined in 2017 to about 13%, and it's expected to, it's expected to really decline considerably in 2018 to a level of about 9.5%. Most countries maintained stable exchange rate, but of course, stable exchange rates, interest rates in 2017, despite currency depreciation. But also we have seen improvement in most African countries in 2017 in terms of currency stability. We have seen huge depreciations in 2016 and 2015. But by 2017, most currencies stabilized. Inflation remains high in many countries because of oil prices and devaluation. In terms of trade performance, we have noted improvement in terms of exports due to the recovery in the global economy. We have seen increases in exports and a reduction, slight reduction in imports overall. And we expect the African Continental Free Trade Area to play a critical role in Africa's trade performance moving forward, as the next presentation will highlight. In terms of social development, overall, the continent is continue to make positive progress. Poverty headcount ratio declined. Unfortunately, most of the statistics we have for the continent as a whole is outdated. And this is a challenge that we should all work together in order to address. Right now, we don't know the exact poverty rate in Africa today. The statistics we are using is an outdated one. The latest we have was for 2013. And I think this is an embarrassment for us to say, to use these figures. But we believe that when we go country by country, we see a decline in poverty rate in many African countries. However, inequality remains a challenge, and Africa is the second highest unequal continent in terms of Gini coefficient of about 0.44, which is very high, and 7 of the 10 most unequal countries in the world are in Africa. This is a challenge that we need to address collectively, because high inequality is a threat to political and economic stability on the continent. In terms of access to services, education, health, there is also notable improvement across countries, and the overview of economic and social conditions, which is before you, shows improvements across the continents in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of access to clean water, and so on and so on. But we still observe alarming inequities in terms of access to social services, with respect to women and with respect to rural areas. And Africa has the biggest divide between urban and rural areas in the world. Again, this is another threat. Although we have to note that this divide is narrowing, has been narrowing over the last few years, but still it remains very high and it needs to be addressed. We have seen increases in public expenditure across Africa relative to GDP, and today, public expenditure as a ratio of GDP in Africa compares to the ratio in OECD's countries. But the outcomes of these increases in public expenditure are relatively limited. So there is a question about the quality of public expenditure and public sector management. So more needs to be done in order to reallocate resources, public resources, to promote growth and to promote social development. So obviously, we have seen in many countries spending on education, spending on health has been low, although overall public spending increased. Looking at medium-term prospects, again, the medium-term prospects for Africa are positive. We expect Africa to grow by about 3.6% in 2018 and 3.8% in 2019. Again, the same factors that contributed to Africa's growth over the last few years are likely to be sustained in terms of improved macroeconomic environment, in terms of improvement also in political conditions, and in terms of also the recovery. We have seen a slight recovery in productivity, which is something positive. However, productivity in Africa still remains the lowest among all regions, and more needs to be done to increase productivity and to increase diversification away from primary commodities in order to accelerate growth and sustain growth, create jobs. The threats to Africa's growth moving forward also remain more or less the same. The positive trends are likely to continue in terms of political stability and in terms of continued commitment to investment in infrastructure that is likely to foster private investment and so on. But the threats of weather conditions, climate change, and the threats of political instability in some parts of the continents also likely to continue. Also, Africa is highly integrated in the world economy. And we have been seeing this because some analysts argue that Africa is not that integrated in the world economy because we contribute very little to global trade, about 2.2%. We contribute very little to global growth, less than 3%. But while our contribution is small, we are still highly integrated in the world economy in terms of direction of trade, exports and imports. And changes in the global economy always have effects. They can have significant effects on growth and development on the continents. And as I think the next presentation will look at it. This is an issue that we needed to address by trading more among ourselves within the continent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.